Hey guys, today we have an incredible guest on Brown Girl Rising who is going from strength to strength. She's a self-taught artist and now an acclaimed illustrator and best-selling author of two books, How It Feels to Find Yourself and Grow Your Own Way, a journal on building self-confidence. Meera Lee Patel is here with us today and I am so excited. Meera has spent much of her youth being told she was too much, too strong-minded and too independent. And as a pretty outspoken Asian girl myself, I completely resonate with that. From scrubbing her skin to appear lighter and stopping being her truest self, Meera just wanted to fit in and be accepted. Today, however, she's found herself and her own unique way in the world and now looks at her differences as strengths. She's raised her self-confidence and now helps people connect with themselves in the same way. Meera, welcome to Brown Girl Rising.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I've followed you guys for so many years, and I'm thrilled to be here in conversation with you.
Oh, that's so amazing. I'm so excited to have you here. So look, the first question I ask all my guests to open up with is, what does it mean to you to be unlimited?
Honestly, I think being unlimited means feeling unlimited by yourself. We are our own worst critics. I feel like I hold myself back more than any cultural or social limitation or any other person. It's my own mind, my own heart that keeps me in the same place. And I think my path has always been to unlock that, to work on being open and remaining open so that I can do the things I want to do. I can be the person I know I am without stopping myself.
Mm. And it wasn't always like that, was it, for you? Like, I know that when you were younger, obviously, it was quite hard growing up where you grow up. So can you tell us a little bit about your life as a young child and what it was like?
Yeah. My parents immigrated here in the 80s from India, and they settled in New Jersey because a lot of the Indian diaspora settles there because of the community they've been built. And there's Little India in Edison, New Jersey. We're very close to New York City, where there's a huge South Asian population. And of course, immigrants want familiarity, they want community. They want to kind of rebuild what they had at home in this strange new place where the customs are different, people look and behave differently, the language is different. So, all of that is natural. And being, the parents that they are, as most children of immigrants will say, they wanted the best for the next generation, for their own sons and daughters. And so they chose a very, very safe, very, very white, tiny, tiny little community to raise us in, one where we could walk to and from school, one that had, grade A schools that would, what they felt would ensure the best future for us. And all of that was wonderful, except we were outsiders. We were the only non-white family. We were definitely the only Indian family. I was one of the only people I knew in my immediate surroundings that spoke more than one language, who had a home that looked very different from all the other homes, who cooked food that was different, spoke a different language, dressed differently, spent their weekends and holidays and doing different activities and different rituals and traditions. And my peers it was not lost on them. And we were picked on a lot. We were told that, we live in the ghetto part of the neighborhood and we are poor and we smell like curry,
Oh, wow.
the familiar insult. So I will say, like, I was unhappy for a lot of my adolescence, especially in the middle school years where children start noticing differences and they also start building alliances. I
Mm.
think middle school ages, 8 to 14 is very, it can be a lot of survival in adolescence. Nobody wants to feel left out. And I think when you're growing up, a surefire way to make sure you're not left out is by leaving other people out. And
Okay.
so,
So forming
you
cliques
know,
and things like that, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. So I also grew up in a very white dominated town, but it was like
Yeah,
in the countryside. So I wasn't in a big city. And
sure.
my experience was a little bit different to that, if I'm honest with you. So I never got made to feel like an outcast, apart from
Wow.
around Diwali, where I was dressed up like a little dolly and like paraded
Yeah,
around school.
yeah,
And I feel lucky that I never had that. You know, you talked about the racism and you smelled like curry and stuff like that. I never actually had that, apart from once
wow.
being called a brown chocolate teddy bear. So that was
Yeah,
literally it. So I have to say, like, my experience was slightly different. And I enjoyed
yeah,
being two different cultures in terms of
sure.
the dressing up and stuff. So how did you find that? Like, you know, you say that you had weekends where you were doing different things to
Yeah.
your peers. Like, did you enjoy any of it?
This is a really good question. It's hard for me to recall a lot of it. I will say a lot of the traditions like Diwali, celebrating Navaratri at home or going to temple, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed a lot of the customs, a lot of the traditions. Even now, I have really fond memories of making desserts with my mom or
Mm,
dressing up. I love our culture's clothing and the colors and all of that. But I will, if I'm being honest, they were things that I felt I secretly enjoyed within the confines of my home and in my school atmosphere and with peers, with people I was trying to be friends with in my everyday life. It, like you said, I felt like I had two lives.
mm,
I had my Indian life with my family and extended family, and when we went to Garba and temple and things like that. And then I had my school life where I was trying so hard to fit in and not be different. And when people, I brought friends home, I didn't want to speak in Gujarati. I
mm.
only answered in English. And I can't regret
Me too,
that
by the
because
way.
it's
Me
how,
too. Only answer in English.
yeah,
Terrible, isn't it?
it is. And now, I don't regret it. I don't regret that I behaved that way, but I wonder what it would be like if I had had more of your experience,
Mm,
because now, I speak broken Gujarati
mm,
and it's hard for me to pass the language on to my daughters. And I regret that,
yeah,
you know, that I
yeah.
can't teach them. And the language is going to be lost with my generation. And that brings me a great deal of sadness. So I think it's difficult to assimilate. I think it's difficult to kind of find your own way as immigrants, children of immigrants, because there are so many worlds that you're straddling and you're
Mm,
trying to figure out who you are and how you make all those worlds fit for you.
absolutely. So I also have broken Gujarati, and my dad was a Gujarati teacher. So
Oh my
something went
gosh.
wrong along the line, right? Okay, so you say you felt really different from a young age and felt like a bit of an outcast. So do you think if you'd been raised in a more Asian community, because actually I have family or I had family in Jersey, they're now in Tennessee, Texas as
Yeah.
well. Do you think things would have been different had you been raised more within the brown community, or do you think you still would have felt a little bit outcast?
I can't answer that because I don't have that experience, but I
Mm,
do have a lot of friends that grew up in more diverse communities with more South Asian populations. And I will say they grew up with stronger Indian communities. And they have those relationships now
yeah.
where they are raising their children, they speak the language, they do the festivities and traditions together. And now, as a mother, I do wish I had that, and it's
Mm,
something I'm trying to cultivate.
beautiful.
Um, and as an adult, it's a little bit harder to form those communities just for sheer lack of time. And because as an adult, you have so many different standards for friendships and community and what you're willing to let into your life and what you have time for. So I do wish that I had some of those stronger relationships now. I
Mm.
have wonderful friends, but I do wish I had a larger Indian community specifically.
Yeah, Abija, come over. We'll
I
have
know,
you
I would
here.
love to.
Okay, cool. So look, you say that you used to scrub your skin to try and lighten it.
Yeah.
Why? And what kind of pain did you go through for you to do that?
I wanted to fit in. I didn't want to be different. I wanted to be accepted. I kept asking myself, why was I born Indian instead of white? And that, I think that is such a, like, I hate, it's a shameful way to feel when I look back at it now and I see how beautiful we are, how rich our culture is, how loving our families are, and such intricacy and spirituality and complexity in our culture and our
Mhm.
country
Yeah.
and in our race. And it pains me that not only me, but any child would wish to have been born differently, not because they didn't like who they are, but because their peers or their community kind of, with their own actions and behavior, turned that child against him or herself.
Mhm.
And that is, I think, a symptom of, at least for me, from my experience, that is a symptom of American culture.
Yeah.
And it is a issue in racism and diversity and also parenting.
Yeah.
um, to not be doing the work of exposing your child to a lot of different people so that when they see someone that doesn't look like them, they're not shocked, they are not afraid, they don't think that there's something wrong with that person. It's hard work, but that's something I'm trying to do with my own children. And I wish that all parents had the ability to do that. And I wish our society was a lot more accepting and loving when it comes to immigrants specifically, but also just people who are different,
Mm.
who live differently, who think differently. You can see, I'm sure you read the news about how divided our country is and how volatile it is. It's not only that people don't share the same opinion, but it's that they have lost all sense of decorum and
Mm.
decency and the ability to see a person as a human being. And that is a true issue for my generation and for the generations we're raising. So I
Yeah.
wish it
And
was different.
yeah, we see that a lot in the news, right?
Yeah.
Like what's going on in America with racism, and I don't know whether that stems from politics or anything. I'm not going to get into that today because it's not about that.
Sure.
But it's interesting because I never did the skin whitening thing.
Yeah.
And I am slightly darker. I think this beautiful ring light doesn't show it. But I did things like bleaching my hair. So for example,
Yeah.
as an Indian girl growing up, my father had a lot of hair, and I ended up having like a mustache at the age of 15.
Oh,
I had
yeah.
sideburns that went all the way down to like my neckline, hairy arms. I used to wax. I used to get called. Okay, so I did actually experience bullying. You just reminded me. They used to call me Gillette, the best a man can get, because Gillette was the razor, right? And that
Yeah. Yeah.
literally kids, boys used to sing it around like, you need Gillette. Like, it was horrible. So you're right. I did.
Awful.
I've obviously blocked that and
Sure.
compartmentalized that. But Jolene, did you ever come across Jolene? The hair bleaching.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Everyone did it. Why did we do
Everyone did it.
it?
Yeah. I did it.
I spent
I
thousands
got
of
lasered, I got waxed at such a young age. Like
yeah.
that's how, a 12-year-old is spending her time, like waxing
Yeah.
everything,
But then
you
can you
know?
believe like in India they still like promote skin whitening creams?
I do, I see that. Colorism, like it's in every community. There's always the aspirational whiteness to
Mm.
be as light as you possibly can in every community.
Yeah.
And I think that is tough. That is a message that I think a lot of women of color are growing up with. And it's even when you're older and you logically know that you are beautiful, that you accept yourself, it's still right there in the back of your head. You should be lighter, you should be more hairless, you should look a certain way, weight, everything. And I think that society is very tough on women.
There's this
And
ideal,
also
isn't
that they
there?
don't,
Mm.
what's that?
So there's an ideal image that a woman should
There
be.
is an ideal and it's impossible.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's not one that a human person can achieve, and nor should they feel they have to.
Yeah. I have to say though, I love vitamin D and I love tanning. I think I look healthier with the tan. So I'm
Yeah,
definitely different to a lot of the people I know in my
but
social
that's your
media.
choice. That's your choice. yeah, whatever you decide you like and you want for yourself, that's different than feeling pressured or that you should do something.
Mm. So can we talk about when you realized, because obviously you went through quite a tough upbringing in terms of your confidence, you lost your confidence in yourself, but can we talk about when you realized actually your differences were actually your strengths? What happened?
I think that was, that was much, much later in life. I will say that when I entered high school, I went to a way more diverse high school and it was a breath of fresh air. I felt truly life was beginning again. It was an amazing 4 years. I made some incredible friends. I started getting into art and creative writing. My high school really nourished those parts of me and encouraged them. And I felt myself starting to reconnect to myself. But my real confidence didn't come, I think, until later in my 20s when I had gone to university and graduated and I started working. And it's when, I started making a life for myself. I wasn't in my parents' home anymore. I lived in Brooklyn. I was exploring New York City. I was figuring out who I was as a person and living in such a diverse place like New York. There's no reason to feel badly about yourself.
Mm.
Everybody is different, and all differences are, if not embraced, they are accepted, and they are not seen as boundaries between you and another person, or at least that was my experience.
Mm.
So I felt a lot more confident and comfortable in being who I am and in seeing that, being bilingual, that's a
Mm.
strength. Not everybody has that, not everybody can communicate in more than one way. Having a set of traditions that other people aren't privy to, that's a strength, to be exposed to two different worlds, to be a part of two different cultures. That what an amazing blessing in this life to be able to experience all of that. So I
Yes.
think it came as a result of being older and more mature
Mm-hmm.
and being able to see those sides of these differences, but also from being in a place where I was no longer the outsider.
And I think like cities like New York and London are really good melting pots for us to actually experience so much more. Even with me coming from the countryside where I grew up around horses and sheep, and then I came into London, and first time in my life I met a Sikh person, like I didn't know what a Sikh person was. And I'm
Yeah.
absolutely honest about that. And I've spoken about it
Mm.
before because until 21, I hadn't met a Punjabi person. Like, how insane is that? Come to London, literally all my friends are Punjabi now. It's insane. You became an artist and you've started drawing and creating these beautiful illustrations. Do you think that was the start of you building your confidence again? And what was it about art that drew you in? Sorry about the pun.
Yeah, I do think that's a big thing. I think art has the ability to connect people despite who they are, what their backgrounds are, and what their experiences are. So I think it's a universal language. And I think that for me, it was a it was a way for me to express myself and connect with other people, but also a way for me to connect with myself.
Mm.
And as I began doing that, I gained more confidence because I was becoming more privy to who I was and what my values were and what mattered to me. And so I think when I began making art in my late 20s, I was working full time at a publishing company. It was a technical publishing company.
Okay.
We published journals for electrical engineers.
Oh, wow.
And
That sounds
my
thrilling.
dad was an electrical engineer, of course.
Of course.
So he was really excited, and I was not. And I was pretty miserable. And art was my way to feel alive,
Mm.
to feel like I wasn't just anybody, that I had a voice and I had a purpose, and that I could do something that was full of meaning.
Mm.
And so I worked full time and I made art on the side for about a year before I kind of made a vow to myself that I was going to figure this out and I was going to figure out how to support myself through my art. And it took 8 more years of working full time
Wow.
and freelancing before finally in 2017, I quit my job and started working for myself.
Wow.
So it was a long path, and it was, there was a lot of sacrifice in terms of just being a normal 20-year-old. I worked full time, then I came home and I worked on my art, and that was every day for nearly a decade. So I put friendships, relationships, vacations, a lot of that stuff on the back burner
Wow.
because this is what I wanted. I really wanted to make this work.
Yeah.
Um, and I did, and I say that with hesitation now because when I was in it, I didn't know that I would. And I had to ask myself so many times, is this really what you want? Because you can stop. You
Yeah.
can make art on the side and you can work and be a regular person and go enjoy your life and be with your friends, like form community. And you don't have to work this hard all the time. But every time I gave myself permission to stop and to give up, I didn't want to. I said, no, I don't want to. I want to try. And that determination, I think, is what allowed me to finally get to where I wanted to go.
So you have to have self-belief, basically, determination and self-belief, right? To continue, because a lot of people would have just stopped.
I do think so, but I want to be careful to say it's not something you have to feel all the time. It's not that I didn't feel uncertain or discouraged or have a ton of self-doubt. I had all of that. But when I told myself, you can stop if you want to, I said, no, I'm going to keep going. So, however faint that little flame is, it can be faint, it can flicker, it can even go out sometimes, but it is important that it always comes back. Because people ask me all the time, what do you think is the difference between, especially art, especially for an Indian or South Asian person, where that is not, you have very little in the way of role models or encouragement, or in a lot of families, like familial support. They say, be a lawyer, be a doctor, be an engineer. If you don't have that support, like, it really needs to come from inside. And I do think the only thing that will separate someone who makes it and someone who doesn't is just the determination. The only difference is that one person didn't give up.
Yeah, absolutely true. So obviously you didn't go down the typical lawyer, doctor, dentist, pharmacist route. Did you find you had a lot of cultural or societal barriers in your way when you decided to take this art path as your career?
I will say my parents have always been supportive of my creativity, but they were not supportive of it as a career path. And I think at the time I felt pretty resentful about that because my role models in the art world were a lot of other people who were white. And so that is to say, they had the benefits not only, of being the dominant, but also generational wealth, parents who could support them if they didn't make it, just a lot of financial support that we did not have. And obviously now I understand, my parents moved here with nothing. And they wanted to ensure that we would be stable, that we would be able to support ourselves. So I don't think they did anything wrong, but it was really up to me to prove it to them and to myself that I could do it. And I think when you talk about were there any, societal or cultural obstacles, I think not having representation, not having the role models of someone who looks like me that did this on their own, I think that can lead to a lot of loneliness and a lot of disconnect. And so I do think, that matters. And I think it matters in books, reading to our children, like, having characters that look like us and just being able to point them to people who come from the same or similar backgrounds and that have achieved whatever goals or dreams they are interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like I have a nephew, and luckily we have some books that, you know, he can go, that looks like that character looks like me. So I think, you know, the world is adapting, and it's a really beautiful thing to see, actually. So I want to talk about your book, actually, and actually your journal in particular. So obviously I've had a bit of time with this journal, and I really dug in, and I found that it really helps you think about who you are, what you've achieved, and even like the mistakes you've made and what you do if you were to go back. So why do you think a journal like this is needed in today's world?
Oh, I think self-confidence is an incredibly complex issue. I think as women, it can be very hard to feel enough because our world tells us from birth, I think, that we're not. And there are so many social, cultural, political barriers between a woman and what she wants to accomplish in her life. And I think being constantly told that you need to be softer or harder or less rigid and more flexible, and you need to be able to be a loving mother, but also provide income for your family. Like there are so many contradictory ways we want women to be.
Yeah.
And again, in America, with very little support for accomplishing those things.
Yeah, you don't get maternity
really
leave, do you? Like, what is it, 12 weeks maternity leave or something, if that?
6.
Oh, that's even worse than I thought. Oh my God.
Yeah, 6. And then there's no universal early childhood. So from 0 to 5, there's just no childcare for your child. And daycares, nannies, everything, it's astronomically, priced. So, often the mother ends up staying at home. And there's so many reasons for why she is the one at home. Obviously, there are the gender roles, but then there are also the pay gap and all of that. So, we could get into that. I could talk about it ad nauseum. But all of that is to say that your self-confidence can really be eroded. And I think if you lose your confidence, then you lose your way. You lose your sense of self. You don't know who you are. You don't remember what you want to achieve or the values you want to live by. And you also can't be the person you want to be, not only to yourself, but to others, to your family, to your friends, to your community. And so I think self-confidence, which I believe is rooted in self-love, is the first basic tenet to having any sort of fulfilling and meaningful life.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that. Yeah. Self-love is the key to living your purpose. Without it, you cannot live your purpose. Like, not at all. And that's something that I teach my clients all the time on my program. So absolutely. But do you then think that self-confidence is like a muscle then? Do you have to keep practicing it?
I do. I don't think it's something you find once and then it's yours forever. And that's actually why I wrote this journal. I wrote it. I had Nadi, my firstborn was 2, and I was pregnant with my second. And I had not come out of the shock of entering motherhood when I became pregnant with Frida. And I still didn't know who I was. I didn't like myself. I didn't feel like I had any confidence as a mother. And I wrote the journal as a way to, I said, I have to figure this out. I don't like myself. I don't like looking in the mirror. And I am not only raising a young girl, but pregnant with a second. And all I want is for my girls to feel confident, to like who they are, to not feel swayed by how other people look at them or what they think about them or who they tell them they should be. I want them to have a strong internal compass that guides them. I don't want them to be guided by anything outside of themselves. And I'm having these thoughts and I'm realizing that where I was in my life, I did not have a strong internal compass. I questioned myself constantly. I looked to others for approval or to tell me what to do or to reassure me that I was a good person and a good mother, that I was smart, that I was capable. And so when I set out to write this journal, it was for me. It was to find my way back to myself. And so when you ask me, is it a muscle? It is a muscle because I had it before and I was determined to get it back.
Yeah.
And now I am through writing it actually, I'm working through Go Your Own Way. At the moment, I'm doing a page every day, which is really a strange experience, to work through something that you wrote and to realize like, oh, I wrote this prompt, this exercise for other people, and it's really hard. And I feel squeamish completing this page, to realize that I've come so far, but I still want to go further. I want to go deeper.
Yeah.
It is a muscle. I know I will lose it again. I know I will falter again. I will be in a place where I feel utterly shaken. But the confidence that will stay with me always is knowing that I can rebuild, knowing that it doesn't have to be this way and that it's not going to stay this way. I think that is a confidence that you can take with you always, knowing that you can change your situation.
So at essence, you're doing this for your daughters, aren't you? You're doing it to change the ancestral lineage, essentially.
I mean, I think that's a great point. I am doing it for them, but I will say I'm doing it for me too. And I have to do it for me first if I'm going to do it for them.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to this. You mentioned something about a patriarchal society, and we live in this society which, we can go on this one, but I feel like is designed for women to lose their self-confidence, is designed to pit women against each other as well. And you're saying like, in America, you only get 6 weeks maternity, and at 6 weeks you're either expected to stick your baby into nursery and go back to work, or sorry, you're going to lose your job, and then you're going to end up not knowing who you are, because actually a sense of purpose usually comes from a sense of service, right? And that's how we serve in our jobs. So like, what are your thoughts around how we change this patriarchal society if we can, and how we build ourselves back up?
This is such a complex question, but I think a lot of it has to do with seeing a woman as a birther, seeing that her purpose, for society to feel that a woman's sole purpose in life is to bear and raise children. I think that is probably the biggest problem, because all of these boundaries that are put in place in our society and culture, like you said, to strip a woman of her confidence is in essence to keep her submissive, to keep her quiet, to prevent her from creating change in this system. I feel that the patriarchal society wants women to be too busy bearing and raising children to make any sort of change in the world. That's the goal. And that's why they only get 6 weeks leave. And that's why there's no universal childcare. And that's why healthcare is so astronomical. And that's why most women give up their careers to stay at home, because there is no one to care for their children who is either qualified or affordable. There's like not a lot of choices, I think, once you decide to have children in America.
Yeah.
And I think the feminism, that definition of feminism that we've been sold, that I grew up with, that I saw when I was a young girl, that I saw women and mothers wearing, that definition of feminism is that you can do it all.
It is.
You can be a good wife, you can be a great mother, you can have a great career, you can do it all. We're going to let us men are going to give you permission to do it all with zero support. So
and
if
I was
you
about
really
to
want
ask,
it,
I was about to ask, what are the men doing?
well, they're just one job. That's it.
One job.
And I think that was I grew up thinking like, I'm a woman, I can do it all. Look at my mom, she does it all. My mom did it all. And I thought that's what feminism was. And now I realize that that is such a trick. That is a trick meant for you to exhaust yourself so that it is self-sacrificial. It does not consider the woman or the mother to be a valuable human being at all, worthy of her own ambition or
Mhm.
wants or desires. It asks her to give herself up completely for her family and for society. And that's not feminism.
No.
So, what I think needs to happen, and this is, just based on what I'm thinking now, I'm sure there are tons of holes in this philosophy. But what I really believe would change is that if each individual in the world saw it as their own responsibility to mother and care for another person, that does not mean literally, giving birth, but it means the role of caregiving does not rest just on the person giving birth or on women in general.
Mm.
It belongs to everybody. If we're going to be truly a community, then each person needs to feel that it is their responsibility as a human to learn how to give care to others.
Mm.
And I think that would lead to some sort of equitability.
Yeah. And in a way, it's like stepping back in time a little bit, because
Yeah.
actually
Yep.
in the villages of India and obviously like Mexico and all these like indigenous places, like they raised children as a village. It took a
Yeah.
village, right?
Yep.
And it
Yep.
should still be like that. And I know that there are places like in Austin, people are coming together and rebuilding these communities. And I think that's such a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. And from my perspective, I do see like at some point the patriarchy is gonna like combust into itself, because the rise of the feminine is more apparent today than it was
Definitely.
when I was born in the 80s, for example. And
Right.
I see a lot more women leaning into their intuition and being in that receiving mode and having people around them caring for them as well as them caring for others. And I think
Right.
it's going to be a big change in the next few years. I really do, especially with everything going on in the world right now.
Right. I really
Yeah.
hope so. I mean, I love that the optimism is refreshing. So that's really nice.
Yeah, that's one thing I have, is optimistic for sure. So look, we're going into the new year. Everyone's going on about new year, new me, and wanting to make changes. Now, how would you go ahead and make these changes? And do you think doing these new year, new me things are actually even achievable for people if they're looking to build their confidence, if they're looking to change their life?
I do think so. I
Mm.
think that any sort of change is slow and gradual. Any sort of real grounding change, which is to say, any sort of self-evolution is slow. It is gradual. It takes time to sink in, to feel different. And while you're working at it, it can feel really, really thankless, and it
Mm.
can feel really discouraging because you're consciously trying to change the way your brain works and the way your body behaves. But you have to give it time. You have to be committed to the practice. It's a practice.
Yeah.
And I do think it leads to change.
Yeah.
And so I would advise anybody that's like picking up a journal or starting to meditate or starting to exercise or eat differently or whatever they need um, for themselves to give themselves a break, and also to know it doesn't have to feel good all the time,
Mm.
and you don't need to see or feel results. The important part is that you're taking that same step every day. Establish a habit, establish a new routine,
Yeah.
and you'll see 6 months from now, a year from now, you're going to be in a completely different place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's literally declaring what you want. It's
Mm-hmm.
about being consistent, and every day, 1% better, compound effect.
Yep.
Keep going. Consistency is key, right?
Yep. I totally
So-
agree.
Yeah. So if there's anybody out there who's maybe lacking in confidence and struggling with their self-confidence, what's the first thing that they should do in order to make a change and on that journey or building that self-confidence muscle?
I think an exercise that I find to be incredibly difficult but effective is to learn to look in the mirror.
Mm.
I think a lot of us don't realize that when we look in the mirror, we're usually being self-critical. We're thinking, "Oh my gosh, like I wish I didn't look like that. I need mascara. I need foundation. Oh, look at my skin, blah, blah, blah." I think being able to look in the mirror for 2 minutes and not be self-critical and to work up towards looking in the mirror and feeling compassion for the person staring back at you is a great way to unlock self-love and to build empathy towards yourself the way you would for a loved one. And I think that is probably going to be the biggest bridge towards building self-confidence, is unlocking the ability to feel love for yourself and to forgive yourself for being whatever way, you're reprimanding yourself for. So I would start with that it sounds simple. It is so difficult. I will say it's hard, but look in the mirror for a couple minutes every day and try not to criticize yourself and try to work on feeling compassion.
I've done mirror work before.
Yeah.
And in fact, I do it quite a lot. But actually looking in the mirror and looking into your eyes, like into your soul, is so hard. Like I have been in tears doing it. It's such a poignant practice, such an important practice for us to do. And then, yeah, I would definitely say, and then kind of affirm to yourself what, who you are. Like we are, as women, we're so critical of our own bodies, let alone everything else, right? And so looking in the mirror is one of the hardest things to do, but I love that one. So yeah, build your self-confidence by starting to look in the mirror and just see yourself.
To see yourself, exactly. To see yourself, to notice yourself.
Beautiful. Okay, so we are going to have to wrap up soon, but I wanted to ask you, what are the 5 things that give you a confidence boost today?
Oh my gosh, today specifically?
No, just in general today, as in now.
Okay. I will say, we just talked about mirror work, but when I look in the mirror, it gives me confidence to know that I am a good person trying their best and who is trying a little bit harder each day. A confidence boost for me is seeing my 2 little girls, so small, so sweet, who look to me for comfort and knowing that I not only have the ability, but the desire to care for them. The third one is my brain. It makes me so happy to know that I have a brain that works the way it does, that enables me to write and to make art that connects with other people. I will say a walk. I go for at least 2 or 3 walks every day.
Every day?
Well, I have a 7-month-old, so I got to get her out.
Fair enough.
So we go on lots of walks. And the air, the sunlight or the clouds, the trees, like I try to listen to all of it. It always resets me. It always makes me feel more like a person in the world. And that is very confident, very confidence giving. And the last one, I think, is the personal philosophy that things will always be different. So whatever is bothering me right now, whatever I feel stuck with, whatever is giving me grief, it will change. And the good things will change too. So I try to stay with the good, knowing it will change, and I try to let go of the bad, knowing that will change too.
So actually, you just said a word that I love, stuck. I love that word. So how do you quickly go from feeling stuck to unstuck? Do you have any like embodied practices that you use to kind of bridge the gap between that lower brain thinking of, oh my God, my life's shit, rah, 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 to like that, yes, let's just go for it, girl?
I mean, action changes attitude. So I've learned to give myself, I'll say, all right, you're allowed to feel like garbage for 30 minutes. And I'll wallow and I'll say, why is this happening to me? And oh my goodness, etc. And then I say, okay, what are 3 things I can do to change the way I feel and the position that I am in? And if it's professional, I've been rejected for a job, or I didn't get, XYZ that I was working so hard towards, I say, okay, I'm going to reach out to 3 more people for 3 different opportunities, or I'm going to apply for 3 different things. And that immediately makes me feel, the likelihood of me getting whatever I'm applying for is very slim, but the fact that I'm trying changes how I feel. I take back control. I take back power over my life.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm trying to change my situation, and that always brings me confidence.
Yeah. There's definitely magic in the action.
Definitely.
And I
Yeah.
think
And
also looking at things that you're really grateful for in this moment, even if it's sucky, right?
gratitude always. I mean, there's always so much to be grateful for. It can, you in the deepest grief, there is still something to be grateful for. And I will say, I wonder, sorry to change the subject kind of, but I wonder if you share, I wonder if, did you have to navigate the difference between gratitude and guilt growing up? That was because of my immigrant upbringing. That has been a complicated one for me.
Really? Can you explain that,
Yeah.
please? Like, what do you mean?
Sure. So I think that being grateful has been ingrained in us so much. My parents have always been like, we're so lucky. Be grateful, be grateful, be grateful.
Right.
But in a way, I think not intentionally at all, but in a way that has made it very difficult for me to celebrate myself because I'm always quick to say, well, somebody else is doing better, or I could have tried harder, or I could have achieved more. And also for feeling guilty for what I have.
Yeah.
That gratitude can turn into guilt. And so that is something that I've had to navigate.
Okay. And so how do you celebrate yourself today? Are you able to celebrate yourself today?
Honestly, I just make it a point to, but it's very difficult. I talk about it with my husband a lot. Like when these books came out, it's so easy for me to say, I had a book come out, like big deal. Like people are doing so many greater monumental things and I could have done more and blah, blah, blah. But when these came out, I told myself, I'm going to take a little time for myself, take myself for coffee, tell myself like you did something good. You're trying to make a change in the world. You're trying to help people. Just remember like how much, I went through to make these two books and to put myself into them. And that is not to be, is there so much more I could be doing? Yes. Is there more that I will be doing? Yes. Does that mean that these two little achievements aren't grand in their own way and shouldn't be celebrated? No. So I try to be a little bit more present and I try to be less future oriented. That is my work. That's something I'm working on every day. Yeah.
Yeah. So being in the moment, I think
In the moment.
that's so important, right? If you're living in the future, there's always going to be anxiety attached to that, like,
Yeah.
where am I going, etc. And it's great doing these visualizations to get where you want to be, but actually live in the present. It's so important to celebrate yourself. I mean, I'll be honest, I celebrate myself every day. I don't have guilt for being grateful. I feel like if you've achieved something, be grateful for it. And of course, at the back of my mind, it's like, okay, not everybody has what I have, but if you can send them loving vibes and healing vibes or whatever, because there's a lot going on right now in the world, and some of it's pretty disgusting.
Absolutely. And the guilt doesn't get you anywhere. It's not real guilt, So
exactly.
You gotta let it go.
And you got to be in the present. Amazing. So if someone wants to get hold of you, and if someone wants to get hold of you and your books, how do they come into your world, Meera?
They can find me online at Meera Lee Patel on Instagram. They can visit me at my website, meeralee.com. And I also write a weekly newsletter called Dear Somebody, and that is on Substack. So they can Google Substack Meera Lee Patel and they'll find it.
Amazing, amazing. It's been incredible having you on the Brown Girl Rising podcast. You truly are a Brown Girl Rising in our own unique way, and I love that. I'm going to look you up next time in America and we're going to go for a coffee. How about that?
Please.
I
would love that.
In New York, but I'm in New York all the time. So
I would love that. Yes.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And guys, I will see you next week. Thank you.